Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The house was silent, so silent that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen down the hall. I thought I was alone. That's when the soft creak of my bedroom door broke the quiet, and I looked up to see her standing there. My stepdaughter. She didn't say a word at first, just leaned against the doorway with an expression I couldn't quite read. The kind of look that makes your stomach twist and your pulse jump. Slowly, she stepped into the room, her bare feet barely making a sound on the floor. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say, but before I could speak, she was closer, too close. The air between us shifted, heavy and electric, as though it carried an unspoken question. I could feel the warmth radiating from her as she leaned in slightly, her shoulder brushing mine like it had been an accident, but I knew it wasn't. My heartbeat kicked into overdrive, and I froze. Her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking, daring me to look away. I didn't. There was a tiny smirk playing at the corner of her lips, like she knew exactly the effect she was having on me. My breath hitched when she tilted her head, closing the space even further, so near I could feel her hair brushing my skin. I tried to step back, to make sense of what was happening, but my body refused to move. The tension was magnetic, pulling me in tighter. The room suddenly felt too small, the silence too loud, the closeness too much to ignore. Then she whispered something, barely audible, teasing, almost playful, and the words sent a shiver through me. My hands trembled, my thoughts scattered, and for a second, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. She was right there, standing so close that I couldn't tell if she was about to laugh, confess, or do something far bolder. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew nothing would be the same after this moment. And then, just as suddenly as she'd moved in, she paused. The silence stretched, unbearable, as I waited for her next move. She lingered there, her closeness still buzzing in my chest long after she pulled back. My hands trembled in my lap, though I tried to steady them. What unsettled me most wasn't just her daring, it was the way a piece of me didn't want her to stop. To anyone looking in from the outside, our home had always appeared perfect. My husband worked long hours, providing everything we needed. I played the part of the supportive wife, smiling through dinner conversations, hosting small gatherings, keeping the rhythm of the house steady. But beneath that routine, there were cracks, silent, deep, and growing wider with each passing year. His absence was more than physical. He was distant even when sitting across from me at the table. Words between us were mechanical, functional, without weight or warmth. I couldn't remember the last time he had really looked at me, as though I were someone more than a fixture in his life. That kind of loneliness, it doesn't shout. It whispers in the spaces of your heart until the silence becomes unbearable. And then there was her, my stepdaughter. Bold where I was careful. Restless where I had grown weary. I'd always thought of her as unpredictable, a free spirit who challenged boundaries just to see if they would bend. But now, with her sudden closeness, I realized she saw through me in ways no one else had. She noticed the walls I built to protect myself, the shadows of unhappiness I tried to hide. That look in her eyes earlier, it wasn't just mischief. It was recognition. It was as if she knew something I hadn't dared to admit, that I wanted more. That beneath the polished surface of who I was supposed to be, a part of me was starving for connection, for touch, for something that felt alive. I remembered the way her shoulder had brushed mine, deliberate, slow, enough to ignite a fire that made me both nervous and curious. My heart still raced with the memory of it. I hated myself for how easily I'd frozen, for how tempted I was to lean in. The house felt colder without her presence, though she was only down the hall. Every creak in the floorboard, every flicker of shadow made me wonder if she'd return. And if she did, would I have the strength to stop her this time? The suspense was unbearable, tangled in guilt and desire. I knew I shouldn't feel this way. I knew the lines we were nearing were dangerous. Yet the truth sat heavy in my chest. Part of me wanted her to cross them. And maybe part of me was already waiting. I tried to steady myself that evening, convincing my thoughts to settle. But no matter how hard I tried, the image of her leaning close, her smirk, her voice, soft and teasing, kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't just a memory, it was a feeling that clung to me like static, impossible to shake. Later, when I walked into the kitchen, I found her there. She was leaning against the counter, sipping water slowly, watching me with those same curious eyes. She didn't look away when I caught her staring. Instead, she tilted her head, lips curling into that half-smile again, like she knew exactly what I'd been thinking about all along. My pulse skipped. I looked away quickly, fumbling with the glass I'd grabbed, but the silence between us grew louder, heavier, charged with something unspoken. "You seem distracted," she finally said, her voice playful yet sharp, cutting right into me. The way she said it wasn't innocent, it carried a challenge, a dare. My throat tightened as I tried to respond, but the words felt clumsy. What unsettled me most was how deliberate she was. Every glance, every step closer, it was like she was testing how far she could push before I broke. And I was already dangerously close to breaking. I noticed the way her gaze lingered too long, how she brushed past me just a little too closely when reaching for something on the shelf. Her perfume drifted in the air, subtle but intoxicating, leaving me unsteady. A pang of jealousy struck me out of nowhere when her phone lit up on the counter, a message flashing across the screen. My chest tightened, irrational and sharp. I shouldn't care who she was talking to, yet the thought of her attention belonging to someone else burned hotter than I expected. She noticed. Her smirk deepened, eyes narrowing slightly, as if she'd read every thought written across my face. And then she leaned in, her voice dropping low, almost a whisper meant only for me. "You don't have to pretend, you know." The words sent a rush through me, equal parts fear and temptation. I froze, caught between wanting to step back and wanting to step closer. The line between right and wrong had never felt so thin. And I could feel us both standing on the edge, ready to tip over. The night grew heavier, the silence of the house pressing in like a secret neither of us could escape. I thought I could avoid her, keep busy, keep moving, but it was as if every corner I turned, she was already there. Watching. Waiting. When the storm outside began, the rain against the windows added an eerie rhythm to the tension pulsing between us. The lights flickered once, then steadied, casting a dim golden glow through the hall. I found myself in the living room, trying to distract my thoughts with the sound of the rain, until I realized I wasn't alone. She was already there, curled lazily in the armchair across from me. Her legs tucked under her, her gaze steady, locked on me like she had been expecting this moment. "Funny how it's just us tonight," she murmured, her voice smooth, threaded with something dangerous. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in my throat. My heartbeat thundered, echoing in my ears, as she rose slowly from the chair. Every step she took toward me seemed louder than the rain, deliberate and unhurried, like she knew I wouldn't stop her. When she finally stood in front of me, the space between us dissolved into nothing. She leaned down, one hand on the armrest beside me, trapping me in place. My breath hitched as her face hovered just inches from mine, her eyes searching, testing, pulling me deeper into the very thing I had promised myself I wouldn't feel. The closeness was unbearable, her warmth, her scent, the way her lips parted ever so slightly like she was about to speak but didn't. My fingers clenched into fists against my knees, fighting the urge to reach out, to close that tiny, tortuous gap. For a moment, time stood still. My entire world condensed into that charged silence, into the spark between us that neither of us dared name. Then, just as I thought she might close the space, the sound of the front door handle rattling cut through the moment. We both froze, hearts racing, breath caught between danger and desire, on the very edge of something we couldn't undo. The sound of the front door rattling cut through the silence like lightning. My chest tightened, panic surging as I froze under her gaze. For a second, neither of us moved. The storm outside roared louder, but in that small living room, the only storm I felt was between us. Her hand was still braced on the armrest, her face so close I could feel the heat of her breath. My lips parted to say something, anything, but then the handle stopped rattling. Whoever was at the door hadn't come in. The house remained ours, empty, and the weight of what almost happened hung thick in the air. She didn't step back. Instead, she leaned in closer, her voice low, her words sharp enough to cut through me. "You feel it too, don't you?" The question lodged in my chest like a blade. My throat went dry. For weeks, months even, I had buried every hint of loneliness, every craving for something real, something alive. And now, here it was, staring me straight in the eyes, refusing to be ignored. My heart raced so hard I thought she could hear it. I shook my head slightly, whispering, "This isn't right," but my voice betrayed me, trembling, weak, more confession than rejection. She tilted her head, studying me like she already knew the truth. "You can lie to yourself all you want," she murmured, "but you can't lie to me." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. She saw me, saw the cracks in my carefully built world, saw the emptiness my husband never noticed. For the first time in so long, I felt exposed. Seen. Desired. And then, before I could answer, the sound of a phone rang sharp and sudden. My husband's name lit up on the screen across the room. My stomach dropped, the weight of betrayal crashing into me all at once. I could almost hear his voice, distant and hollow, reminding me of promises made long ago. I looked back at her. She hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. Instead, her eyes burned even brighter, as if the call only fueled her daring. "Answer it," she whispered, almost taunting. "Pretend everything's perfect." I stared at her, torn between the safe lie waiting on the other end of the phone and the dangerous truth standing inches from me. My hand trembled as I reached for the device, my breath shallow, my pulse screaming. This was it, the breaking point. A choice I could no longer avoid. And as my finger hovered above the glowing screen, her hand brushed against mine, deliberate and bold. The phone kept ringing. The storm kept raging. And in that suspended moment, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The phone finally stopped ringing, leaving behind an aching silence that felt louder than the storm outside. My hand hovered in the air, frozen in place, as if the weight of that single decision had drained the strength from me. She was still there, her fingers brushing mine like an unspoken dare. Her eyes burned into me, fierce and unrelenting, demanding that I choose. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart felt split down the middle, loyalty on one side, desire on the other, both pulling me apart. Finally, I pulled my hand back, clutching it to my chest as if I could guard the truth from spilling out. "This has to stop," I whispered, but the crack in my voice betrayed me. Her expression flickered, the sly smirk fading into something rawer, more vulnerable. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling despite its strength. "Because you're afraid of him? Or because you're afraid of yourself?" The words pierced deeper than I wanted to admit. My chest ached, tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. I turned away, staring at the rain sliding down the window, feeling the storm inside me mirror the one outside. I thought about my husband, about the distance, the absence, the way he had stopped seeing me long ago. The thought should have grounded me, but instead, it hollowed me out. I wasn't just afraid of him. I was afraid of what I wanted. Afraid of admitting that for the first time in years, I felt alive. When I didn't answer, she stepped back, her arms folding across her chest like she was bracing against the hurt. I should have known, she said softly, but her voice cracked under the weight of the words. You'll keep pretending, won't you? Pretending you're happy. Pretending you don't want this. I turned sharply, anger flaring, not at her, but at myself. Don't you think I know what I want? My voice rose louder than I intended, trembling with frustration. But wanting doesn't make it right. It doesn't erase the consequences. The room shook with our silence. My breath came fast, ragged, and she stared at me like she was searching for the tiniest crack in my resolve. Finally, I broke. The tears fell, hot and unstoppable. I can't lose myself, I whispered. Not like this. Her face softened then, the fire in her eyes dimming into something gentler, sadder. She stepped closer, but not with the same boldness as before. This time, it was tender, cautious. She placed a hand on my cheek, wiping away a tear with her thumb. You're already lost, she said, her voice steady now, filled with quiet certainty. You just haven't admitted it yet. The words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. And in that fragile silence, I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something that could no longer be contained. The storm finally began to ease, the heavy rain softening into a quiet drizzle that tapped gently against the windows. The house felt calmer, as though it too was catching its breath after everything that had just happened. My heart was still pounding, though not from fear anymore. This time, it was from something I had stopped myself from admitting for far too long. I stood frozen, her hand still resting on my cheek. Her touch wasn't daring this time, it was gentle, steady, grounding. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting myself feel it, letting the noise in my head fall away. When I opened them again, she was still there, watching me like I was the only person in the world. I don't want to pretend anymore, I whispered, my voice breaking under the weight of the truth. The words felt terrifying and freeing all at once, like tearing open a door I had locked for years. Her eyes softened instantly, her lips parting as though she had been waiting, hoping, praying to hear those words. She didn't rush to speak, instead, she leaned closer, closing the distance with a slowness that made every heartbeat count. When our foreheads touched, I exhaled a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The closeness wasn't reckless anymore, it was tender, warm, a promise that whatever this was, it meant something real. You don't have to be afraid, she murmured. Not with me. My chest ached, but this time, it wasn't from emptiness. It was from the fullness of the moment, from the flood of emotion I could no longer contain. For so long, I had been unseen, unheard, untouched. And now, here she was, choosing me, holding me in a way that made me believe I was worth choosing. The tension that had once felt dangerous now melted into something softer, deeper. I rested my hand over hers, pressing it against my face, silently telling her I didn't want her to let go. We stayed like that, wrapped in the silence of the storm's end, before I finally whispered, if this is wrong, I don't want to be right. She smiled then, a real smile, free of teasing or challenge, just pure affection. And when she pulled me into her arms, it wasn't fire or chaos anymore, it was peace. A sense of belonging. The world outside could stay complicated, messy, unforgiving. But in that moment, in that embrace, none of it mattered. We had found something undeniable, something worth holding on to. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Because I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone.